Welcome. I'm Eric Frowerth from the Department of Education. Today, we will be holding a meeting for the Advisory Council for Career and Technical Education. Before we get started, I'll read through a checklist to ensure that the meeting that we're holding is in compliance with the Right to Know law. As chair of the Advisory Council, I find that due to the state of emergency as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, and in accordance with the Governor's Emergency Order 12, pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04 and its extensions, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. Please note there is no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to this meeting, which was authorized pursuant to the Governor's Emergency Order. In accordance with the emergency order, I am confirming that we are providing public access to the meeting by telephone, with additional access possible by video and other electronic means. We are utilizing Zoom for this electronic meeting. All members of the committee and selected legislative staff have the ability to communicate contemporaneously in this meeting through this platform. And the public has access to contemporaneously watch and/or listen to the meeting on Zoom or YouTube and via phone by following the directions and links provided on the General Court website. We have provided public notice of the necessary information for accessing this meeting in the Senate calendar. We are providing a mechanism for the public to alert the public body during the meeting if there are problems with access. If anyone has a problem, please email remotesenate@ledge.state.nh.us or call 603-271-3043. In the event the public is unable to access the meeting, will be adjourned and rescheduled. Please note that all votes taken during this meeting shall be done by roll call vote. Finally, let's start the meeting by taking a roll call attendance. When each member states their presence, please also state where they are and if anyone else is in the room with you during the meeting, which is required under Right to Know law. So I will get started. I'm Eric Frowerth. I'm attending this from Manchester, and I am alone with the exception of a dog at my feet. Pete?
My name is Pete McNamara with the New Hampshire Auto Dealers Association. I'm in Concord, New Hampshire. My wife is in the house along with a couple of cats. And good morning.
Vaso?
Hi, my name is Vaso Partinuri. I'm the CTE director at the Applied Technology Center in Milford, New Hampshire, and I am alone in the room.
Thank you. Rob? Oh, you're muted, Rob.
Sorry about that. Good morning. My name is Rob Millay. I'm the superintendent for SAU 29, which includes Keene High School and the Cheshire Career Center. I am in my office at 193 Maple Ave, and there is no one else in the room with me.
Thank you. Will?
Morning. Will Arvell, Director of the Division of Economic Development under Business and Economic Affairs. I am home alone.
Thank you. Senator Waters.
Senator David Waters and Dover alone in this room. Good morning.
Morning. Senator Khan.
Morning, Eric. J. Khan. I'm in Stoddard today. My wife is elsewhere in the house.
Thank you. Beth.
Good morning. I'm Beth Doran, the Director of College Access Programs, the Community College System. I am home in Derry with nobody else in the house.
Thank you. Roxy.
I'm Roxy Severance. I'm in Whitefield, New Hampshire, and I am alone in this room.
Thank you. Al.
Al Smith, the Director, Hugh Gowan Center in Littleton. I'm alone in this room. I'm actually in Vermont, away for the weekend.
Okay, thank you. Mike.
Good morning, Mike Summers with the Lodging and Restaurant Association, and I'm alone.
Thank you. Bruce.
And Bruce Farm, Principal, Lakes Region Technology Center, also representing the CTA Directors of State with Val and Al. And Al, congratulations for going to Vermont for the weekend. I'm by myself today.
Thank you. And there is someone on the phone. But they are muted, so we don't
I just
know.
I just had them unmute or asked them to unmute.
*6 usually helps you unmute with Zoom.
If you can hear us, *6 on the telephone should help you unmute.
Well,
Well, they're gone. They're going to come back, I bet.
And now they're gone.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm gonna have to switch to a phone because my internet's unstable, so I'm gonna switch to my phone line.
Okay. And then I just got a message that the members of my office did not get links to come in. Do you know if those were sent or if they were expected to do the public one?
I will send them again. No problem. The ones that
Okay,
you would
perfect.
send me in a separate email, correct?
Yeah, it was Diane, Jeff, Kathy. If you need them again, I can shoot that list while we're moving. So,
I
okay.
got it. I will do it for you right now. Hold on.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
Yeah, they're all emailing me from different directions. Great. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us on what for some of us it is a holiday and others is not. So I appreciate everybody coming in. Oh, we have the phone back. Is that Roxy?
Yes, this is Roxy.
Okay, welcome.
Thanks.
Okay, so we'll get started. Does everybody have a copy of the agenda or would you want me to share it up on the shared screen?
If you could put it up on the screen, that'd be great.
Absolutely. Nope. Okay, here it is. So everybody can see it. First order of business is we are on the hunt for our monthly note taker.
I'll go ahead and do it again, Eric, if you're okay with that.
Thank you. Pete has accepted being our note taker. He has done so well in the past. We appreciate it. And so our next order of business is approval of minutes for the previous 2 meetings. So I did send those out in advance so you had a chance to review. It is the minutes for the May meeting and the minutes for the most recent September meeting. Actually, was it the May meeting? Yes. Did anybody have any additions, changes, or comments on either of them before we open it up for a vote to approve? Seeing nothing. Could I ask for a motion to approve the May 13th?
So move, Senator Waters.
Second, okay.
Larvell.
And now we need to go through and do a roll call vote. Pete.
Aye.
Basso.
Aye.
Rob.
Aye.
Will.
Aye.
Senator Waters.
Yes.
Beth.
Yes.
Al.
Aye.
Mike.
I will abstain as I believe I missed the meeting.
Okay, thank you. Bruce.
Aye.
All right, thank you. And Vaso was, and Roxy would not have known what was going on at that meeting. She was not there either, so.
I'm abstaining, yes.
Thank you. The minutes for the last meeting of last academic year have been approved. Thank you. We can move forward to the minutes from the most recent, the September meeting. Same, we'll go back through. Pete.
Aye.
Basso.
Aye.
Rob.
I'll have to abstain on that one.
Okay, thank you. Will.
Same with me. I'll have to abstain. I wasn't in attendance.
Thank you. Senator Waters.
Yes.
Beth.
Aye.
Al.
Aye.
Mike.
I'll have to abstain again. Sorry.
That's all right. Thank you. Bruce.
Aye.
And Roxy.
Aye.
Thank you. Minutes have been accepted. Moving on, we had 2 committee seats that were up for renewal this year, Rob Millay and Pete McNamara. And both, with agreement with the commissioner, have been reappointed for an additional term. Welcome back. We did at the same time have a departure. David Chen has moved to Colorado to be closer to his family. It was apparently a very last minute sudden choice. Right after the meeting last month, he let Senator Waters and I know that he'd flown out for the weekend, bought a house, and was moving. And so it was. I have informed the commissioner, and he will be working on getting us another school board member. He believes potentially someone from the Exeter region. Keep everybody updated on that.
Hey, Eric, this is Alan. Can you actually resend me those emails? I can't find it now in my email.
So one of my team found us. There she is. Yeah. Diane is there as Kathy. That's interesting.
That is weird.
So how did you find did you find the link, Diane?
Kathy sent it to me.
Oh,
Okay,
so yeah, you're in as
that's
Kathy. They're all individual links. Okay.
Did you sent me one though? I can sign out and try to sign in as myself.
You can actually just rename yourself, or you should have the ability to do that in the panelist or the panelist board where it shows your participants. When it says more, you should be able to change your name.
Thank you.
Okay. And I'm assuming Jeff is trying to get into. He's been blowing up my phone.
What's his last name, Eric? I'm sorry.
Beard. It's Jeffrey Beard.
Oh yeah, yeah. He should. Yeah, he should have a link too.
Okay. Yeah. I think he's blowing up my phone.
I just resent him his link.
Perfect. Thank you. Oh yeah, he said he's in it as an observer, but he can't join. So yeah, he came in on the other one.
Okay, I can get him right over and promote him.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay. So the main order of business for today, for the next hour, and we are surprisingly right on time. That's exciting. Will be to talk about the rules and laws governing CTE, with the idea being this being the opening salvo for the conversation to start talking about some of the rules and laws that impact CTE and what may be an appropriate beginning to start changing them. And that was part of the reason for Senator Khan's appearance, who we seem to have lost. Because the bill that he did put through for us last year did not make it through. It was part of the omnibus spending bill and got vetoed. And so that's one bill that we would like to get put back through again. To remind everybody, that added a school counselor to this group as a permanent member. And it also gave the Department of Education the right to create rules around SB 276, specifically around the creation of the career certificate or the credential, which had no formal definition. And so
we do have Senator Khan on the line, by the way. He's here.
Oh, perfect.
I can unmute him. Senator Khan, can you hear us? We just asked you to unmute.
Oh, there he is.
There you go.
All good. I'm going to be eating breakfast early. Okay. So anyway, I'll do that off screen and be listening.
Okay.
Yep.
That's fine. Thank you. So we just wanted to, you and I had already spoken about making sure that we find a way to get that bill reintroduced this legislative session.
Yeah, indeed.
Perfect. Thank you.
And whatever, that's why I'm listening. We'll cover what needs to be done for I'd be interested in hearing the conversation if it needs to be done, if the current legislation is sufficient for rulemaking to take place. And if not, well, then this could turn into the statutory revision that you're going to be talking about as well.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So with that, I will open it up. I sent out some nice heavy reading material a few weeks ago, which is why I sent it out in advance. So it is RSA 188E, which is the primary legislation around CTE. And then I sent out the rules. And previously, CTE had been covered under the Ed Department Rules 1400. And several years ago, 1400 was abolished. And part of 1400 was absorbed into 1300. But there were large chunks of information that did not make that migration. And the question is, looking at those rules, was there anything in 1400 that over the past several years has been discovered should be readopted and brought back in? Or are there other pieces that now that, as times are changing, we would like to request to be included in? And again, this is the opening piece as we start discussing this. I'm hoping that our directors will bring this back to the directors group as well to discuss with them of they have boots on the ground. Are there things that this is the opportunity? If we're going to make some wholesale changes, it's a great opportunity to bring some things in. And the same with Beth at the community college level to bring it back to the people with the boots on the ground of there's very little in the legislation addresses the college system and CTE. And are there stronger ties that need to be built between the pathways? And with that, I will open up for first thoughts.
Well, just quick question, Eric. What's your time frame, or when do you hope to get feedback back from our group?
For the rules, it's pretty rolling. We can present the rules at any time as we do things. For the law, I will pass that to Senator Waters and Senator Khan as to what a timeline is for introducing legislation.
Well, we don't, we haven't established our filing period for the Senate yet, but it's likely to be late November and parts of December.
Okay.
So really after the election is when we're already working on legislation, but after the election is when things will need to get drafted.
Okay. So we have our meeting 1 month from now, so that would be a good opportunity to start discussing some firm ideas. So over the month of November, we could work together to get something drafted for December. Okay.
So Eric, if you wouldn't mind, I'd bring up a few things.
Sure.
Now, it wasn't clear to me whether you had highlighted some things.
I did. I highlighted a couple things that I thought needed to be talked about.
Highlighting what I got, so maybe we'll get to that in a minute. Well, let me just start with an issue we've tossed around when 190 was originally drafted and then finally passed. And it is the relationship between the sending and the receiving schools. And I had originally in 190 had some language that Rick Ladd and I came up with about a right to a career in technical education, and that trying to address even at that time, the quotas that were developed around how many students would go from a sending school to receiving school. And so I wondered if that might be revisited in some way. It would mean a change of the language about the sending schools, but also the receiving schools. I think you'd have to retain the language about, as feasible and space available and so on, but I think there'd be a way to do that. Related to that issue are all the matters around transportation costs, and going through here and, both in statute and in the rules, and this is where Jay's input in terms of what's happening with the Adequacy Commission and the budget in general. But what it seems to me what we could do is in 188E 9,1, it's 188E:9, 1, is change reimbursement to full reimbursement. And that would necessitate some changes in rules in 130502, 130501, and then 130503. And in particular, in 130503, I wondered if there could be some discussion of the current mileage reimbursement rates of 10 cents a mile for bus and 25 cents a mile for, a private transportation. And that also would affect 140501C 6AB, because that's where it's repeated there. So I got some other stuff, but let me just start with those.
Sure. Thank you, and I know that our three directors will probably join in on this. The pandemic and the switch to remote and then hybrid has shined an extraordinarily bright light on access and transportation to CTE. And Senator Waters, I think you hit it on the head with the right to CTE. This is something that our office has been struggling with over the past couple of months as schools have gone to remote, and making conscious decisions primarily for funding, but also some have done it for health, claimed under health reasons, of not sending students to CTE centers. And they've come out and said that we're not going to send our kids. And because CTE is officially an elective, it has become very difficult to sort of force the hand of saying that you have to allow the student. Now, there is a piece in the legislation that gives the right of refusal to the CTE centers, that if a student applies and is accepted, that's up to the CTE center to accept the student. We're having sending districts basically not providing transportation. And we spoke to in-house counsel at the department, who spoke to the Attorney General's office, who has said that because of the way the legislation is drafted, the sending districts do not have to provide the transportation. If transportation is provided, it then talks about how the reimbursement works, but they don't have to actually provide the transportation. So yes, wording around changing that structure of the right to the education and how that transportation is listed, I think would be very beneficial to the to the CTE schools. And I said the three directors can probably talk to challenges they've had right now.
I think, Eric and Senator, again, you've hit the nail on the head on terms of one of the fundamental issues. I would say that uniformly across the state, that's a fundamental issue. In different ways, it affects us depending where we are in the state. However, it needs to be addressed, and that would be welcome, I believe. And I mean, we could cite horror stories, but I think we've kind of discussed this over the last couple of years. So yes. I'm not sure that's necessary, but I'd be glad to give details if you want.
Well, I'm very much in agreement, Bruce. No question.
If I may just ask then, Eric, and bring this up with the directors and so on. I mean, I've been concerned, and Rick Ladd was as well when we first started working on all this, that we're creating kind of second-class citizens for our students who don't really have the opportunity to take advantage of this education, which is just so obvious what they need. And also with all the things we're trying to do with dual pathways and connecting the CTEs to the community colleges, all of that. So I think it's kind of intensified the issues that led me to kind of try to come up with some language. I think it would have to be in that some kind of language would have to be figured out. Where I tried to do it last time was with the original authorizing statement about career and technical education, that there need to be some kind of language there, perhaps with a caveat over feasibility or something. Mm-hmm. Then I think that the issue will be, how do we not only change put some requirement language there about transporting students. I mean, I'm thinking like this week, Dover CTE is fully open, and I'm wondering whether the students from other districts are coming to campus or not. But then, the budgetary impact though is, I mean, what have we been paying recently? What percentage of the cost of transportation?
I don't have the percentage offhand. What I can tell you is from the last year when we did the numbers, to fully reimburse for transportation would have required an additional $2 million.
Well, yeah, and that's, I mean, we've made some progress on it, but that is a number that stuck in my mind too. So I just think there would be what would be required is to stick in statute full reimbursement, and then where the rules we have to follow from that. And again, that 10-cent and 25-cent thing, that's in there as well. I have no idea what relationship that has to any reality.
Yeah, absolutely. And I believe if the wording in the legislation was full reimbursement transportation, it would sort of make null and void the department rule around the 10 cents, because the law says follow the department rule. So if you turned it into full reimbursement, we could then edit 1300 and 1400 to say full reimbursement.
Yeah, but I mean, of course, as we all know, that the House Bill 2 might end up voiding that. Anything in there if they're not going to put in the full amount. But I think we're supposed to set educational policy, and it seems to me this is what educational policy needs right now.
I am also fully in support of revisiting the transportation issue. The city directors, we had our meeting last Friday, and we are all hurting in different ways because of this. Milford, we are very lucky and unlucky. We have very few students coming from sending schools. So I speak about this as an observer more than as someone who's hurting a lot right now. But there are other schools like Concord, for example, that has typically 340 sending students coming in from other school districts, and that's not what they're seeing. Exeter has 7 sending schools, and the busing issue is pretty significant over there. So any change in the legislation that would allow us to address this issue, the sooner the better, would be much appreciated by the directors.
And Eric, what's happening to the money that is being saved in transportation right now?
So it will ultimately just go into tuition. The way the legislation is set up now, the $9 million is in the kitty. Transportation is paid first, and then whatever is remaining is used for tuition. And it is never enough to hit the 75%. And again, it was last year when we did it, it was 2 million short on the tuition side as well. So the 9 million was a great bump up, but to fully fund transportation and fully reimburse 75%, a total of 4 million more would have been required.
Well, that's where, I mean, if we could put that word full in there for the, full and under the, full reimbursement for tuition with the proviso, with the understanding it's 75-25, but.
Right, and that's how it is now. It says, the state will pay up to 75%, but then there's the whole description of what happens if the 75% isn't there. And it used to be every school's tuition was reduced proportionately to how much money was available. Several years ago, that rule was changed, and the amount of money left over was divided by the number of students that were impacted, and a dollar figure was attached to each student for tuition, and that was sent to each school. And in several schools, that was actually more than the tuition. So these schools were making money, and other schools, it was substantially less than their tuition. And I know that we talked about this last year, and part of the wait was to find out what was going to happen with adequacy, because if the adequacy formula changes considerably, this might as well. So I don't know if we want to touch how the tuition is divided right now, but if the transportation is fully funded, then the rest of the law still would work of the state will pay up to 75% based on the following formula. And I think that's still acceptable. The other piece around, and I guess it is around the wording of the right to CTE, and I'm gonna ask Rob to help out here. Winchester schools. Winchester Public Schools this year is not providing high school bus transportation to Keene High School, correct?
That's correct.
Is their right, the way the law is written. So my question is, outside of CTE, how is a Winchester kid supposed to get to Keene High School if there's no bus?
So that's the $1 million question, Eric. And what students have been doing is they've been self-transporting, being transported by a parent. Some cases they've been carpooling and sharing rides, which when a person becomes symptomatic becomes very problematic with regard to participation in school with the pandemic guidelines that we have for the Keene School District. But it's really been a difficult time to get the students from Winchester into Keene High School because they reduced their budget last March by like over $1 million. And that was one of the things that they needed to cut was transportation for high school students.
Okay.
Would Winchester be liable legally if one of those carpooling cars had a crash and a student was injured or killed, and could they sue because the high school did not provide what was required in terms of other transportation?
I'm not so sure. That's a great question, Senator, and I'm not so sure that they would or would not because the law does not require them to provide transportation beyond grade 8. So the law says you must provide transportation up through grade 8. It doesn't say you must provide transportation for your high school students. So I'm not convinced that would hold up.
And the only reason I knew about Winchester is first week of school, I got a phone call from our CTE director that there were 3 Winchester kids who were basically told by their school counselor, well, there's no busing. And so if you can't get to Keene High School, you have to be a remote student at Keene High School, which is all well and good, except they were an auto student and 2 construction students, I believe, and needed to be at the Cheshire Center for CTE. And that was one of the places where I had reached out to the Attorney General's office and found out that because of the way the legislation is drafted, we cannot require Winchester to put these kids in a bus, in an Uber, in anything. Even if we were reimbursing, there was no requirement that the sending school actually provide the transportation. And I don't know how we reword the legislation to say that.
Yeah. No, I mean,
they did find transportation apparently, and those 3 kids were able to get to school, but it sort of opened the door of this is going to continue to happen, even outside of a pandemic.
Yeah, and I would suggest that some of the other challenges and difficulties are that every district is designing and doing what they need to do for their districts in order to bring them to some form of on-site teaching and learning, and they don't all match up. For example, many districts out in this part of the state are using a hybrid model, but what that means is there's 2 days for each of the cohorts, and then that 5th day is a remote support type of a day. Those remote support days don't all fall on the same day of the week. So for Keene, it falls on a Wednesday. We felt that having that remote day on a Wednesday, we would get better results than having it on a Friday, as people might think of it as an early, long weekend type of an approach. Other districts that send to the Career Center at Keene High School do have their remote day on Friday. So we were able to overcome those challenges, and the students are coming in, and so we are making it work. But there's just a lot of difficulty when you're navigating a pandemic, that little nuances that you don't necessarily put at the top of your priority list because you're worried about safety and overall well-being of people. When you get down into the weeds a lot more, they become important enough that they need consideration and attention.
So can I bring up another one, Eric?
Yep. I said we could go on forever with transportation, so let's move on.
Yeah. So I was wondering the language around the renovation or expanding of schools, CT centers. You know, I wonder whether we need to change it to from renovating and expanding to renovating, expanding, or replacing. And that would, I mean, there never really was a real legal issue over the schools that have basically torn down the old one and put up a new one. But I'm wondering whether having a little change of language there would also provide a little more flexibility as to whether some CTE buildings under Perkins get built in conjunction with the community colleges or else or other arrangements.
Sure. And the other piece to that is discussing what happens in 5 years when we have hit the end of the renovation cycle. And without speaking for the CTE directors, I'm pretty sure they would all agree that while it's great that this amount of money is available when they need it, the lag time between when they renovate and the next time they come up available is far too long, and the schools don't have the ability to renovate spaces that they might need to upgrade in between. And looking at a model where rather than every school gets this huge amount of money every 30 years to renovate, have a budgetary allotment out of each biennium and allow schools to submit in for grants where they might be able to renovate smaller parts of their building each time, but more than 2 schools could renovate smaller parts. A model that I'm aware of is in Massachusetts. It's called the Mass Skills Capital Grant. And it was a partnership between the Department of Education and I think Will's counterpart over there. And they pooled resources together. And schools, both high school and college, could apply for up to $500,000 for renovation projects. So a school that wanted to add a biotech program could renovate just that part of their school just to add the biotech program. But the proposals all had to be based on employment needs within the community. So there had to be a justifiable reason for doing this expansion. But it allows schools to build and renovate small pieces as they need it and keep the school up to date rather than waiting 25, 30 years to renovate. And I would throw that out there as a conversation of an option. And I'm sure there's other ways to do it, but this way we would also know how much. And in the biennium right now, it sort of floats every year based on what the schools are submitting in, potentially to have a specific pool of money that could then be available through an RFP for grants.
Eric, I find that concept intriguing. The caution my voice is unfortunately New Hampshire has had the past practice of not funding things at a level that is really sustainable for everyone. And as we look at this, I think it definitely is worth looking at. It would be unfortunate to have that pool of money insufficient to really cover the state where the needs are. I hate to wait 30 years between renovations, but on the other hand, we get in a situation where all of a sudden, just to pick up numbers, that I am competing against Pinkerton or Manchester for both good ideas, both equal centers, if you will, but the pool's not big enough, would be unfortunate.
I concur with Bruce. Milford is now on its 25th year since it was built, and we have another 5 years to go. I personally can't wait. We are looking to add a health science program. We literally don't have an inch of space. But the other thing that is also very important is that our centers were built 25 years ago or 20 years ago with the labor market needs that were at the time, and they do not necessarily align with what is out there today. So I think that 30 years is a very, very, very long time. But also I strongly feel that we should, in support of what Bruce said, that if there's 5 of us trying to start a health science program, and it on average costs the same, how do you share the money? How do you prioritize who needs what? It's gonna be tough.
Rob?
So I absolutely hear Val and Vasso's concerns, but I think this is something that we really ought to take a look at, because I do believe you can build in structure to say, all right, well, Milford has been waiting 25 years, so that's going to be part of the evaluation criteria, where you're going to divert the money to, but it also needs to be based on a purpose, a specific purpose, so that you're not just saying, hey, look, I want to get this money to do a renovation and I don't really know what we're looking for. I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense to have a vision and evaluate those centers that have been waiting the longest, giving them a little bit more of a weighted evaluation, so that it's not continually going to the same centers that have been recently renovated. I think it can be done. I think it can be equitable, and I would really stress the emphasis on making sure that it is equitable so that centers are not falling behind.
So to put some perspective on it, each biennium for the last several, for school renovations, when we've done 2 schools, the money has been between $20 and $30 million that has been split between the 2 schools that are renovating. So if in every biennium, $25 million was put in for renovation, that potentially could be $1 million for each CTE center every biennium for a renovation. And what the architects tell us, when the architects do the renovations, they guesstimate it is about $1 million per program. So if you wanted to build a health science lab, when they do their, with all of their plans, if a CTE center has 12 programs, the budget for the reno is usually around $12 million. So $1 million per school every biennium would allow every school potentially every 2 to 3 years to renovate a lab. Which in the grand scheme of things, Vasu, how many programs do you have?
We have 11 right now.
So you have 11 programs. So that would cut your renovation time down, that over the course of a dozen years, you would have been able to renovate every single one of your labs, as opposed to waiting 30 years now. So I said, it's a thought. Obviously we would want to look at some other models, but what I have found out from around the country, New Hampshire is one of the only states that does set aside this money for renovation. Our neighbors, both in Vermont and Maine, do not have this regular amount of money that goes into renovating their centers. So we don't want to lose it in any way, shape, or form, but I definitely think we'd want to look at some models for how we could better utilize it.
Something to weigh here. One, do you want a cap at $500,000? So it sounds like that might be low. Second is how the annual appropriation and competition for a grant competition might influence this being a capital appropriation versus an operating appropriation. And, David, think about that for a second. And because the pool of dollars, the competition for the pool of dollars is different.
Well, yeah, I mean, Jay raises a good point, because it's not just getting it built, but then running it after that too.
Mm-hmm.
Capital budget is always tight. We've had some difficulty over the last several cycles in achieving, without bumping into subsequent budgets, this commitment. The commitment, though, is really important, and I think people just get it, not only because the commitment statewide, but also it's that everybody waits in line and they get their turn, and we really try to honor that. So in a way, I worry a little bit about anything that would call into question whether the legislature, year after year after year, will commit itself to this renovation or reconstruction program. And, you know, of course, we got to get through this first cycle, right? So we're talking about 2 years from now.
Right.
I do think, though, that there is some argument to be made for that part, maybe a hybrid, where the part of the Massachusetts plan that says that if it's market driven, demonstrable, and related to a new program or a necessary expansion of an existing program because of the market, that it would be possible to think of some funding that might be available for that, but that I think there'd have to be a proviso that, you know, you've got each of the centers essentially is going to have its own amount, that if they are spending it over 15 or 20, 25 years, they're getting that amount, that maybe they're not going to get the whole amount when their turn comes up. And I think there's a fairness thing there, but also recognition of trying to keep the commitment to the original program. In any of this, I would like to see some flexibility embedded in the legislative language, so that if a CTE center decides that it wants to build in conjunction with a community college, or if it decides it wants to build something in conjunction with a private entity, you know, we had or like the airport proposal, right? I mean, make of that what it was, but it indicates the kind of thing that might occur in the future. And I will say too, you know, with offshore wind, you know, are we going to be building something new for that, really, and have a bunch of the centers involved with it? I don't know, but that's not out of the realm of possibility. So I think we need to keep our commitment to the cycle, and that means that, you know, we maybe ought to have some legislation which anticipates the end of the cycle and recommits to it, because in statute now there's that list of the dates by which things would be completed, and up, you know, running up to 1997, and so that list, you know, maybe needs to be replicated in statute in some fashion. So I'm just some random things, but I think this is one that we probably ought to look at.
Yeah, and the other angle to this and political angle is that school capital matching is, you know, people feel that has been terribly underfunded over the last few years. And I doubt that whatever operating funding formula is going to be available for public education over the next 2 years, I can't imagine embedded into that adequacy grant or fund distribution will be a capital distribution. So capital matching for schools is going to be a categorical decision. It has come under the operating budget. I just think that this might be something that's a great discussion, but if there's still years left on the cycle that you anticipate, and you can describe that to public works or capital projects committees in the House and Senate, I would try to run that cycle through this next appropriation process, and not, yeah, I mean, making a change in this climate the next 2 years may not be timely.
Oh, don't get me wrong. Our intent was to start this conversation now for when the current cycle ends. You know, we wanted to make sure Vaso got her new building. There was no question there. We were committed to everyone currently on the list. But it also brings an interesting question around someone like Fall Mountain, who this year was designated as an independent regional CTE center. However, it has been operating as a satellite of Keene for a number of years, but it was never on the list because it wasn't its own center. So it has no access to any renovation money to expand. And so obviously, you know, in this cycle, we're not doing anything now, but in 5 years from now, they would be at the bottom of the list because they're the newest designated center. So officially they wouldn't be available for renovation money for another 30 years. And so coming up with some sort of structure where every school had the ability to get a smaller piece of the pie at a shorter period of time would be something to discuss. But yes, Senator Khan, we wanted to talk about it now. So in 5 years, we'd be ready for it.
Well, and just the planning cycle too for these CT renovations does go 4 or 5 years out. So that we will pretty shortly after this next biennium, we're going to be into that next phase. And that's why I say with the list, with this, I think, I guess that we do want to keep the kind of commitment to cycling everybody through, but the opportunity is there for the place like you're just describing to bump that up to the top or to embed within this some kind of sequence where you could at a certain point in time get some money, but it's going to affect what you get later on. I think there's some ways to get at this that gives us some more flexibility.
I would like to add something. As a civil engineer with many years of construction management experience, doing these smaller renovations is going to wreak havoc in our schools and school districts, because a $1 million renovation every few years means construction, turning part of our school into a construction site, finding an alternative site for holding those classes. It's not always possible to do this over the summer. It also is problematic in the sense that we will be going back to our school boards every couple of years, asking them for that additional 30%. So I would be going to my school board every few years, asking for another $300,000 to do a $1 million renovation. And depending on the year, that might be possible or not. So it's not just getting in line with the state, but it's also getting in line with the town and how they manage their fiscal resources.
No, I agree. And I said that's as part of the mass model, there was still a match. And just so you're aware, the current legislation in New Hampshire doesn't require your 25% to come from a state bond or a local bond float. You can come up with it any way you want. And in Massachusetts, when we had to do the match, and I don't remember what percentage it was, we had a percentage match. The match also didn't necessarily need to be cash. It could be in kind. So, if we had, one of the projects we got was we built a greenhouse. Well, the greenhouse company provided some in-kind services, whether it was their people came out to help do the construction, things like that. So there wasn't necessarily a cash match, but there was a monetary equivalent match. And it's how we write the legislation is really what the question is. But this is why we want to air this out, to try to figure out what are all the obstacles so we don't hit them once we pass the legislation.
Yeah, has anyone given, and Will, I don't know if you're able to comment on this thought, but CDFA, the matching finance authority for community development, that has it's essentially tax credits where people purchase a certain percent of the cost of the project with their tax credits. That David has, Senator Waters has put out there the program for the $500,000 tax credit, but I wonder if under BFA, maybe that is what it's under, BFA or CDFA. I'm not sure which to do. If there's anyway, it's another funding model that could fit New Hampshire.
Senator Condis. Aye. Yeah, I couldn't comment on that, Senator Khan. I would have to. I know that CDFA does a lot of work with tax credits. My guess is there's a significant competition for those on the business side of things. But It's a good question. I mean, I think it's a question that probably could be asked of CDFA management and see what their thoughts on it are. I mean, from a legislative perspective on the CTE side, I mean, I don't know how that would play out.
To muddy those waters a little bit, Eric, you have made, I've seen your presentation a couple times about comparing Delaware and New Hampshire. And your perspective that one of the things that's different in the participation rates in Delaware is because they're not as restrictive of which high schools are delivering a CTE-like program. Like clearly, some of those programs are entirely facility related and ought to be shared, whether David's idea about with community colleges or among several high school districts, however those are shared. But some of those programs maybe aren't as facility dependent. So I wonder how this conversation and the desire to, I mean, this has to have a workforce pipeline benefit to it, and something that's measurable and compelling for that investment. And anyway, I'll put that one out there, that driving more students statewide into CTE programs for career ready certificates or credentials, ought to be. And then what's the game plan for that? And, I mean, you've addressed that somewhat in the strategic plan for the strategic vision for CTE.
Hey, I apologize for coming in this late. It's Columbus Day up this way, and we got a lot of kids floating around this house right now that should be at school. But I have a comment. It sort of follows up a little bit what Rob had mentioned about needing to, I think I'd like to address even an issue which I think contributes to all this is, what programs are our CTEs going to offer? A lot of traditional high schools cannot even touch the costs or the expenses associated with providing CTE programs. The competitive rates of the tech programs, they're much lower than what can be provided in-house. However, I've seen in several of our high schools where there's an interest to provide in-house CTE crossover type classes. And that's placing an additional tax burden on the local property taxpayer when we're going to start trying to say in the high schools, well, we're going to start teaching these classes, the woodworking classes, and then all the classes associated with building a house. That's going to be, now we're going to start seeing our high schools being competitive with the CTE programs. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that, have we clearly defined that the high school has to get permission from somewhere before they can start expanding their programs and subtracting from the CTE programming? It's a concern to me. I see some of the programs happening at Conway High School, at Kennett, and they've got their CTE program built right in that high school. They can do all kinds of wonderful things. But then I see what my high school is trying to do here. They'd love to move some of the CTE programming to high school. And I really do support that. However, what's that going to do to the CTE center over across the way at Riverbend? So I guess there's a couple questions I'm going to really ask later on. To what degree and what process does the high school have to go through in order to get into providing CTE-like programs, those in-house crossover type programs in their high school?
So it's interesting. Jeff and I have, from our office, have had a couple of these conversations around differentiating between New Hampshire recognized CTE programs and Perkins eligible CTE programs from the federal level. And right now there's no difference. If basically the only way a program is Perkins eligible is if they are part of a recognized regional CTE center. But from a curriculum standpoint, there is nothing stopping a local high school, correct me if I'm wrong here, Rob, from just saying, we'd like to start a video production program. And they get it approved by their local school board, and they find the funding, and they open a video production studio in their high school, and they run the program. Nobody at the state has any say in what that is. And if they're not asking for state funds for it, we don't even know it exists. And I found Colebrook Academy is a great example of this. They have an auto program fully supported by the local community. They've never asked for $1 from the state to support this auto program. We found high schools around the state that have huge video production programs, welding programs, also graphics programs that we don't know anything about in our office because they've never requested to be Perkins eligible. So I don't know if that's something at a state legislative place you can define what a CTE program is and require that if the school would like to offer it, they have to go through an application process with the state. I'm not sure how that would fly.
Well, Eric, on that, I think that would be difficult. That would be a difficult reach to do something like that. But it may be that if we are going to talk about that right to a career and technical education, that a school could say that if they have a program that meets certain criteria, maybe not necessarily to be Perkins eligible, but maybe in everything but name, that they don't have to send that student to the receiving school. So, I mean, if those are there, I think that's an interesting wrinkle on things that Representative Ladd brings up.
Yeah.
Well, so Jeff Beard, morning, everyone. Put my camera on quickly. One thing that is a bit of an interesting wrinkle is right now the definition of career technical education sits in 3 places. It sits in RSA 188E5. It sits in the minimum standards, which defines program. And then it also sits in Perkins. And currently, the state definition and the Perkins definition are almost identical. The one difference is that the state definition includes language that CT programs will be competency-based. But aside from that, they're identical. So distinguishing between CTE that's state approved and approved for Perkins purposes, there is no distinction currently, and I think that's something we ought to consider.
Lindsey Graham sitting next to Diane Feinstein, who's
Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah.
Okay. So in the courtesy of time, there were a couple things, and I guess Senator Waters, they didn't come across highlighted when I sent them out, but I'd like to put out there. Most of them are just updating wording and language in 188. In 188E2 under definitions, we define sending school district. And we define the sending school district as a school district where a student resides who attend a regional center, regional program, et cetera. And then there was an added line that says, if a student attends a chartered school, the sending school district shall be the school district in which the student resides. I'm assuming that language was put in there as charter schools developed. The first line of that really covered it, but the charter school line was put in for clarification. I'd like to add to that, if a student is homeschooled, basically it would be if the student is attending a charter school or is homeschooled, the sending district shall be the school district in which the student resides. We have an increasing number of homeschool students.
That makes sense. Makes sense to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, we're getting a lot of calls of that the sending districts aren't aware that they're responsible for the tuition for a homeschooled student.
Good.
That was one. The next one that I found as I'm scrolling through my law here. I did find some place where it still refers to.
Eric, can I just react to the part where we're going to start supporting the funding of a homeschool student? I believe, and the other elected officers here, senators, might be able to help me out on this. I thought that we had introduced legislation. In fact, I think I was the person that did it, where if a homeschooler wants to attend a high school, the high school's always balked because they weren't getting recognition under average daily membership that this kid was participating in our school. So there's no adequacy funding. Now we have it set up where if a student comes in and if money is available, they may get credit, the high school may get credit for a 0.15 of a student because they're taking that course. Do we have anything like that for the homeschool or for homeschool going into the CTE program, the center?
We don't. Right now, it's the same 25-75 split that the state will pay 75% and then the sending school district pays 25%. And interestingly, if a student is attending a charter school, the homeschool district pays the 25%, even though the charter school is getting the adequacy money to educate the kid. So I don't know if you want to dip into that water as well, that if a charter school student attends a CTE, then the charter school would pay the 25% and not the home school district. I'm not sure. I don't know why it was put in that it was based on the homeschool, but that's how the law currently is written.
It's interesting. It seems a fairness issue, but given the effort that's been made to increase funding for charter schools of late, I'm just wondering whether trying to address that right now would be a kind of a third rail. Maybe Senator Khan hasn't thought about it, but I mean, it surprises me in a way because, if a student is being educated at the main school, a public, so-called public school, not the public charter, then why is that tuition dollar not following that student back to the CTE program?
So, and again, these were, I said, hopefully today is just the opening conversation. So now over the next few weeks, we can keep going with them.
Can I bring up one more thing, Eric, just to get out there, because I know our time is short.
Yep.
I hope we'll have some discussion about, dual pathways and just take a look at what else we might do to make sure, to foster this relationship between the CTEs and the community colleges, and, what else maybe we need to do. I know that there was some, doesn't directly relate to CTEs, but there was some talk about how some of the remedial English programs could be included as paid due to the fact that we have a lot of second language learners, and just that. Then that brings up the other issue too. We've talked about is the English language learning students, and maybe we need to change the statute about that. Nashua has that program that they're getting the ELL education with embedded in the CTE, and maybe we need to talk about that statutorily so that some funding for ELL can go into the CTEs. So I think it's both accessibility issues for the CTEs, but then also the CTE connection to the community colleges that I think others like Senator Khan are more closely involved with that, and perhaps Representative Ladd as well, I would imagine. But this whole area is one that I think we probably could make some good progress on.
Definitely, and that's an increased portion of Perkins as well, as to address these other populations of students, and minority and ELL students fall into that category. And that's part of the challenge that the centers have received of, although the law is written that the center can accept any student that applies once they've completed 1 year of high school, regardless of their grades, the sending school counselors are not either allowing or encouraging the students to apply for CTE, because they have their own rules where they say, well, you can't apply for CTE because you have below a 3.0 GPA, or you haven't completed freshman, all of these other rules, which under the statute, the sending school is not allowed to do. But finding out all those counselors that are, may or may not be even aware of that is the other challenge.
Does DOE have statistics on the number of minorities students or in a high school compared to the number of minority students who are enrolled in CTE?
I can get it.
I think that would be instructive for whether or not we're providing equity.
Yep, I can talk to Greg. That should be something he can pull easily.
Yeah, Jeff Beard again. That data does sit in a couple places. It's collected as part of our Perkins reporting for the feds every year. But in addition, we have a Office of Civil Rights Methods of Administration, and that equity is something that we track very carefully for those purposes also.
Yeah, so we can pull that comparison together pretty easily.
Henry, where are my cats to come kill me?
I like the beginning part of David's question, and I wonder how folks would continue to think about this over the next month. But how do we further the dual credit opportunities for students? I mean, career ready credentials is a good idea. It's, some states are using that really well. We're also funding tuition. We're not providing teachers any stipend for that teaching at the high schools, the dual credit, their dual credit credential. Anyway, what will push this idea, advance it even further than we've done so to date?
If I can just comment on that a little bit, a couple things. I'd like to see us work on more defined pathways using things like not only Running Start, but early college. And we do have a lot of students from CTE centers doing that right now, especially where you have students being able to start CTE in the 10th grade. And by 12th grade, they have time available in their schedule. So we do see students coming down to our colleges for a 12th grade to take some early college courses. Being able to take a look at what Running Start courses are held and what we can do to increase their ability to get more credits through early college, because as we know, not all courses can be taught through Running Start at the high schools. But being able to develop more formal pathways, I think makes a lot of sense. And if you take a look at the matriculation rates from students coming out of Running Start courses and coming to our colleges, over the course of 4 years, it's about 20%. And while Running Start was never about recruitment into our colleges, immediately upon matriculation into college, there's less than 10% of those Running Start students actually come to our colleges. And if we're looking to keep students in New Hampshire, I just think trying to develop more formal pathways, things like the Career Academy, but for a student to leave their high school and go to, just a college 100% full time, I just don't think is for the majority of high school students out there. But being able to combine, which is what we were working on before the pandemic hit. Right now, we're working on with Running Start with things like online registration. But looking at pre-COVID, we were looking at how can we package these courses to students to help them see that, when they graduate from high school, they could have almost, at least a certificate and well on their way to a degree if they properly package the high school Running Start courses with early college. So I think there's definitely a whole lot of room for that. It just would take a coordinated effort.
I would agree with Beth 100%. The more credits we could have our students earn while in high school, certainly huge benefit. for the student and for maintaining some of our students in New Hampshire.
And I'll echo that. Again, Bruce speaking. We've seen a tremendous positive linkage with the community college system over the last decade or so. And the more we can do to facilitate that growing is good. And the more we can work with Beth on the apprenticeship programs that she's doing, we get past this COVID-19 situation. I think that's an opportunity that if SB 190 can reinforce and help, that would be beneficial to our kids.
So thanks. That actually, it brought up one of the questions that I had highlighted that I wanted to ask Beth specifically, but the committee as a group. Within 188, where the dual and concurrent program is listed as under its establishments, 188E26, for anybody who's following along. It allows for students to gain access and support for dual and concurrent programs in STEM and STEM-related courses. But STEM-related course is never defined anywhere. I would challenge that culinary arts is STEM-related because of all the math and science. But I don't think we've ever granted dual or concurrent enrollment, like the tuition, the $150 tuition, if a student wanted to do a culinary class, because that wasn't defined as STEM related. And correct me if I'm wrong, Beth, but is there a way, maybe that's what we need to do further, is better define what STEM related is, or just take it out and make it a CTE pathway. I don't know, but to expand students' access.
Yeah, Eric, this is one of the things I was trying to get at earlier.
Yeah.
And that I know why we did it the way we did it with STEM and STEM related. I mean, clear why we did it that way. But I would like us to entertain the idea of just opening that up, CTE related. And anyway, so that's, I'm sorry to jump into Beth.
No, it fit, we could do the same thing with construction, that it's, they do a lot of geometry in construction. Is that STEM related?
Yeah, I mean, if the point is to get CTE students into these programs connected to the community college, then that's the point.
Yeah.
It could be any field, because all CTE is workforce development, and that's what we're supposed to be about.
Well, we know this is a fiscal related question.
Yes.
So we're going to need help from the community college system to put some dollars to donuts here.
Mm-hmm.
When we initially,
keeping in mind, it was, I think, last year, I think we spent $1.2 million on, reimbursement or funds that were available for STEM scholarships, and we only had 950,000 or so in there. So we've been talking with the governor's office, and they had said that they really don't want students not being able to take advantage of this. But right now, as it stands with the STEM and STEM related courses that we are way over budget on the money that is available. So right now we're borrowing off of next year's funds.
Gotcha.
Well, something to keep in mind, because if it were me, sure, I'd say let's give them, they all should be free, because English Comp, is one of our most popular, is our most popular course, as it should be. It's a gen ed, and every college student needs to take it. But why isn't that eligible for students? And as you said, Senator Waters, there's reasons why it was done the way it was done, and I get that. But it just seems like if at all possible, we should expand that if we can, but keeping in mind that that's very costly. I think Charles Ansell had done some sort of analysis of what it would cost, and it would be well over $2 million to be able to fund most running stock courses.
Yeah, there was a $3.5 million number that's sticking in my head.
Well, as someone who would like us to get to basically making all these free, I think it would be useful in terms of our conversation to, again, see what we want for policy, and there'll be budgetary implications. It might be possible to kind of slow walk this, and that we would add a few programs a year and do it, so the budgetary impacts could be spaced out over a couple of biennia and figure out, which CTE students would be most served by this, how many and what kind of program, and then, program by program. But it would be good to make progress on this. That's all. It really would be.
I love the idea of saying CTE courses, make them CTE courses, but then again, you've also got many courses that are not necessarily CTE courses, like, whatever it might be, a biology or just a, calculus, which aren't technically considered CTE courses that are now eligible.
Well, it could be STEM related, and other CTE.
Others, yeah. It hit me when I was touring one of the schools, and there was a business class from our business program that was running as a running start, and none of the kids in that class would be eligible for this running start scholarship. They all had to pay the $150 to get the running start credit. And then you walk next door into, the health program where the kids are all in, a STEM related class where those kids are all getting the course for free. And so there was an inequity in the building that just because of the program the kid chose, they didn't get the running start class.
This whole thing, Eric, was, and the others are correct, it's a funding issue.
Oh, absolutely.
When we initially did this back in 2017 and brought in this concurrent dual enrollment, there was an effort to have all courses involved. But then when we started recognizing the costs associated that, and after talking with both chancellors, the discussion whittled down to only STEM, science, tech, engineering, mathematics. The intent it was to go much further than that. So, I'm discouraged seeing that it still says only STEM or other approved. I think that it needs to include the language arts, the English, the literature, all that is necessary to perform well. You have to have rhetoric skills to be a manufacturer, communication skills. So let's support it all.
Right.
Eric, what are other states doing in comparison to this?
That's a great question. I can post it. I have a chat board with my counterpart, so I can find out and I talk to Vermont and Maine every 2 weeks, so I can just start there very easily. But to find out what other states are doing.
I can tell you that many states have had these things in place far longer than we have. We're probably one of the few states in the country that did not have any kind of dual or concurrent enrollment policy in place until 2017. So we're definitely behind the times on it, which is unfortunate because we're ahead of the times on, when we started up the program and where we are. I mean, when you look at where we are with Running Start, I mean, last year we had over 10,000 enrollments, which is probably over 7,000 students taking Running Start courses. But yet, we have probably some of the lowest reimbursement for students taking those courses as well.
So as a last question before we move on, because I know we could do this for a long time, but I would like to get to some other things. Oh, okay, Val, you'll be the last. So I have a question.
Okay.
Correct my memory, Jeff. There is an opportunity within Perkins to set aside money as a scholarship fund for extended learning, however it's defined in the federal law. And we determined that what we do for Running Start and dual enrollment would fall under that umbrella. So potentially there's a way that either a school or at the state level, we could set aside some of our Perkins money as a scholarship fund that students could apply for if they had no other way to pay for that class.
Yeah, Eric, that is correct. That's part of the state leadership activities that are included in Perkins.
Okay, so it's state leadership. It's not the local school. It's the state leadership piece.
Correct. I mean, there is an opportunity because the state leadership activities mirror the local activities. They do have the option also. Locals can also offer scholarship funds, as can the community college system using Perkins funds.
So that's an option. And one of the things that we're looking at from our office is a 5-year look back of the amount of money being returned from all the local schools that are not using their full allocations. And it happens for a variety of reasons, so that's one of the things we're going to be looking at from our office. And if it turns out that historically there is, 3% of the money that gets returned every year consistently, maybe that's an opportunity for us at the front end to just set aside that money as a scholarship fund that could be used to supplement some of these things. Because the schools aren't using it now, let's find a way that they can use it to benefit the students.
Eric, I was talking to Bill Emerson. He's the director over at Riverbend just 2 days ago. And he indicated they do have a scholarship fund there, and they're looking to local business and individuals to help support that. Do all CTE programs in the state of New Hampshire have scholarship funds that they set up within their organization and looking for money from outside? Because technically they're allowed to, do this by going out and asking people to donate.
That's a question, and I don't know. We have 3 directors on. They could talk to it, and then if they could answer that quickly, and then I do want to go to Val so we could move on as well.
Let me just toss in there. I think we ought to be very careful going down this road, and that I would be maybe a little more comfortable keeping it at the local level so that you get your Perkins money, and then if you think that some of your students could benefit from extended learning opportunities, that the local folks would have been authorized to provide some scholarship money for that. I think there's gonna be some nervousness about taking something off the top, and we've just been talking about inadequate funding for transportation, tuition. And then I think there'd be some anxiety about how that money gets controlled and allocated at the DOE. So I like the idea, but maybe we could keep it local.
I concur with you, Senator.
I agree, Senator Bruce speaking again. I think each of our local districts handle the, if you will, scholarship different way. I think we all try to meet the needs of the kids that have a demonstrated need and still want to pick up running start. There is that need there. I don't think most of us have, quote, an exact, a designated, quote, scholarship fund, but it is the way that we could use that part of our annual Perkins allocation that would be a chance to tailor it based upon the local community need, which might be different from one center to another.
I know that in several city centers, teachers donate the vouchers that they receive through the community colleges, and we give those also as scholarships at the end of the year to our students who are going to the community colleges. And I can tell you that they are very much appreciated.
And I'd echo that, Val. I think that's pretty much common practice across the state, that those vouchers end up going to the most needful kids due to the generosity of our running start teachers.
Yeah, same in Littleton. And Beth, we're really talking about $75 too, because there's scholarship money available through the college system in a lot of cases.
Yep.
Yep. Okay. All right, Val, did you have?
Yeah, just going back to Rick's comment about the STEM emphasis, I think that ties in to the push on 65-25 at the time, because all the data clearly indicated that STEM degrees and STEM knowledge was the key shortfall in 65-25. So if there was any prioritization in support, it was going to be towards those STEM related fields. So it all tied into the overarching demands of 65-25.
All right, thanks. All right, so we can move on to our updates from our schools. I will close this piece of it. This has been great. And I definitely want to keep this dialogue open. And although I don't want to give it as homework, we are an educationally based organization. So if I throw out some homework, if people could continue to look at these documents, and over the next couple of weeks, I will be happy to be the collector of it. If you can send to me, and I identify in either RSA 188 or in State Board Rule 1300 of where you might see an adjustment you have a question about something along those lines, so I can start collecting them. And so then again, prior to November's meeting, I can send back out to the group where everybody's thinking and what we're looking at. So when we meet in November, we can have a sort of a planned thought of, is there definitive legislation we'd like to put forward this year? And then what could we then move forward into future years? And again, the Ed Board rules, we can present those at any time that the boards meet, so that you may even want to put that on the back burner unless there is something really pressing, and let's get the RSA fixed at this point.
Eric, I would thank you for that effort. And let me just ask if you are able to push this along as far as possible before the next meeting, meaning that you might, we have 4 or 5 topics came up, and I think that there are 1 or 2 individuals or maybe a couple more for each one on the advisory committee that you could work with to get as far as possible towards actual language. Address the things that we've been discussing, because things will start to get pretty frantic after our next meeting. And the farther along we are, it'll help Representative Ladd and Senator Khan and myself and others in the legislature on the advisory council to think about how we're going to proceed.
So, absolutely, we'll do.
Eric, would you mind sending to everyone the 1-300 so that we are all looking at the same document? The way
I'll send.
Yep. That was very helpful.
I will send out 1300 again. Yes.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, perfect. Thank you. So the next piece on our agenda is some updates, info from the schools. I would imagine specifically around remote or hybrid openings and the positives of how things are going. And if there's a common challenge that this board should be aware of, but I would love to hear the positives and the great things that are happening in spite of the challenges. So Vaso, you're in the top corner of my screen, so you get to go first.
It is going a lot smoother than expected, I have to admit, and I say that with a huge smile on my face. It's so wonderful to walk into the CTE programs and see students cooking and hammering things. It's wonderful. I will admit that a month ago I was not half as hopeful as I am right now that we are going to make it through this. My biggest concern right now is next year. So as you can imagine, the number of students in the CTE program has been heavily impacted by this, because these are elective classes and they are hands-on classes. So a lot of students thought, just like I would have thought, that maybe I should take this class next year, because if we go totally remote this year, I won't be able to use our brand new lathe and our beautiful new culinary equipment. So that is impacting the numbers this year, but it's also truly impacting the numbers for next year. How many students are going to go into our second course? How many students are going to have a negative experience this year because we are on a hybrid schedule and decide not to take the class next semester? So I'm very worried about numbers, keeping CTE teachers fully employed next year, and of course, local budgets. I know I don't need to talk about that. Everyone is terrified about local budgets for next year. That's it.
Thanks. Rob, you could talk from your office perspective.
Well, it's really a transitional year with the Cheshire Career Center. We have a new director. We have a new administrative assistant who is replacing the person who had been there since that Career Center opened in the 1970s. She had been there for that long. A huge transitional year when you also consider a new principal at the high school. So a lot of effort of getting everybody up to speed so that we're all on the same page. Everybody has come in with a really phenomenal attitude and moving forward and being able to address things. I do like the energy inside of the Career Center as well as the high school that folks have been bringing on board with them. I see a lot of good things happening. And part of that is, getting out of some old habits that might not have been producing the results we were looking for. And so I think that this newfound energy is going to be very positive and beneficial, especially for the students in the long run. And I would agree with Vaso. This is going to have an impact. It's going to be at least a 2-year cycle on the impact with the enrollment numbers for our programs as a result of this pandemic. I mean, there's no two ways about it. Folks are going to be impacted to some level for the next couple of years. So that's where we are.
All right, thank you. Beth, from the college side.
Well, where do I start? So I guess the youth apprenticeship grant, let's start with that. It's very excited with the response we've got from the high schools thus far, and even some businesses already. Because quite frankly, we've been concerned about the whole business piece, given the current times that we're working under. Our traditional apprenticeship grant pretty much came to a screeching halt, for lack of a better term, in March, when businesses obviously it was not foremost on their agendas to take a look at building apprenticeships. So they're just starting to come back to the table now, but we do have a few businesses that we've talked with already, a handful, that are interested absolutely in a youth apprenticeship model. Okay. So, but more exciting, I think, just at this point now is the positive response we've got from all of the high schools that we've reached out to that are originally sent in some interest upon hearing of the grant. So our grant team is fully in place. We have a grant manager and 2 business and apprentice outreach specialists who will be working on the northern part of the state and the southern part of the state. And the next steps will be to make a definitive list of the high schools that are interested, and then meet with those individual schools to identify where they think their students' needs are, and then to go out to businesses and try to bring some businesses on board to help us develop this youth apprenticeship model. So it's all looking very good initially, and we're very excited about it. To give people just a quick update on the New Hampshire Career Academy, I don't think I've mentioned anything over the past couple of meetings, but we started with 13 students that had been accepted into the program, 2 of which left the program before it really even started on the first day of school, chose to withdraw. And Vaso, this is pretty much for the reasons that you were mentioning. They really wanted the college experience. And, because we're mostly remote, one of them, I think, was in criminal justice, and another was in, I forget what the other one was, but anyway, they really wanted the college experience. They wanted to be on campus, and since most of our courses are hybrid or 100% online, they just did not think that this was the best year for them to start. Another student did drop in the first couple of weeks just because that was probably more than they thought they could handle. And right now we have just 1 student that's we're a little concerned about. So we have a total of 10 right now enrolled. And for the other 9, everything seems to be going really, really well. And again, I think just being able to expand that type of program, not necessarily maybe the way it's being run now. I mean, I don't.
Uh-oh, we lost Beth.
Very helpful. Some of you may or may not know. I'm getting a message that you may not be hearing me. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah, you're back now. You froze up.
Yeah, okay. I thought so. I'm not sure where I lost you, but anyway, so the Career Academy as it stands is going pretty well for the students that are there, and we have some real shining stars too, which is nice. Right. We're in the process of developing a 100% online registration system for Running Start that we hope to go live with at some point this week, that we're pretty excited about too. And that will allow students to easily register for courses and reduce the nightmare paperwork and registration process that we have both at the high school and the college level. I think that's it. I mean, we're still operating in a hybrid mode mostly, with most of our gen eds being online and the lab-based courses taking place on the college campus. We don't have, there's not a lot of students on campus. You may or may not have heard that NCC did pretty much shut down for 2 weeks. No, not that there were any cases or anything that we were alarmed about, but just out of, I guess, the buzzword of an abundance of caution, just because of the rise in cases in that county. So other than that, things seem to be going really well at the colleges, minimal cases, and ones that we have been usually for students who are doing remote learning. So it's really not impacting the college campuses at all.
All right, great, thank you. And
Talk
Senator
things,
Waters.
It would be my assumption that the companies that participate in the apprenticeship program would also then be eligible for the tax credit program.
Yes.
And that might be a selling point for them.
Yes.
Yes. Yep.
And yep, we are talking about that with those that we have been speaking with, definitely.
Yep. Yeah. And to Senator Waters' point about the expanded relationship, Beth is actually, we have a meeting, our office with Beth after this meeting to talk about ways that we can increase the collaboration between the high school programs and the college, possibly starting with regional packs rather than everybody having their own and asking the same business people to go to multiple meetings. That could be an easy way to do that. And so we're looking for some other opportunities that we can work more closely, potentially utilizing the CTE centers as extended classroom space for the community college, potentially even for new, if they wanted to offer a degree they didn't already offer, but our high school program has the space and the equipment. We're just going to open the conversation up this afternoon, right after this meeting, so people are aware of that. Moving around the circle, Bruce.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. You asked for the positive to start with, so I would say that the world is upside down. I mentioned to Mike at the beginning of the meeting, I'm glad I'm not in the hospitality industry right now, but to be in the education field is also a bit uncomfortable. The reports back from my center, as well as right across the state, the tremendous community support and parent support for CTE has really been evident as we've tried to adapt to hybrid schedules and put kids back safely in schools. Many of us can tell stories of people reaching out to us and saying, we want our kids in those CTE programs. It's critical for their future careers. And what can we do to help schools work through this? It's been heartwarming, quite frankly. Second, I would note that the amount of customization going on, it's all over the map and how each of us are responding to this, but we've got kids going to school 2 days a week, other kids going 4 days a week, kids going online to pick up their knowledge. When we get through this COVID-19 nightmare, we've been picking up some better strategies on how to educate kids through it, and that's good. The online learning, my staff did very little stand and deliver instruction to begin with, but they clearly found, using through Google Classroom, YouTube, et cetera, many ways to now provide that instruction outside the school day, so that when the kids come into the classroom, into the lab, we can use that time more effectively. And that's going to be a positive outcome once this nightmare is over. I've got to, however, balance those positives with conversations that we're dealing with. We are not able to, in a hybrid model, really develop our kids' skill level what we'd expect 2 years ago. We're going to have kids graduating into the workforce not as well prepared before COVID as during COVID, and that's wearing on staff. How can we do the best that we can for these kids, and how can we let our employers know that the kids coming from us now are not as skilled as they would 2 years ago? And that's disheartening. enrollment, how do we recruit kids, and how do we fill our classrooms in the fall? I agree that with Rob, this is going to be a 2 or 3 year, 4 year follow-out that is going to have negative effects on some real positive market penetration that we were seeing in CTEs across the state just a couple of years ago. And now we're going to step back and we just going to need to deal with it and face it four square. And related to that is work-based learning and how do we get our kids, once again, working with Val, working with the hospitality, working, thank God for automotive dealers, but how do we get kids back into that workforce and knock down the walls from the school to the workforce? Most of us have put that right on hold for the last 6 months, and it's probably going to be the year before we get back into that. So those three things, the possible drop in enrollment, the work-based learning component, and making sure that our kids are as best prepared as we can as they go on after we leave, are real solid concerns we've got right now. Thank God we're working with good people, I would say. We've got good people doing the best they can. Thank you.
Thanks, Bruce.
Can I follow up to something that Bruce just mentioned? We're struggling up this area, our CTE program, and they're trying to set up meaningful work-based learning opportunities for our seniors. The barriers are not coming from business or industry or manufacturers. The barriers are coming from the high schools saying, you can't be gone from our high school as a senior this year. You have graduation requirements.
Yep.
And even the center saying, can we have hours that extend beyond the 3:30 go home date? A time? Can we have hours in the work-based arena where they work to 6 o'clock? Can they work on a Saturday and get credit for all this? I think we need to have more flexibility on the part of our high schools. The other barrier we're heading up here is there's a difference between statutory language in Vermont and statutory language in New Hampshire in terms of the length of a program, a course, 1.5 hours in New Hampshire, 2 hours over in Vermont. Tremendous scheduling problems when we're sending kids between Vermont and New Hampshire and Vermont.
And Rick, I echo you on both those comments. That school day definition and high school graduation is something that is well past due being looked at, I think.
And the interstate piece is something that part of why I started the conversation with my neighbors was we meet, it's myself, my counterpart in Maine, my counterpart in Vermont, but it's more for us in Vermont because although Maine has a lot of the same issues and challenges we have with remote, rural areas and everything else, we share these 5 schools with Vermont. And she's brand new. My counterpart is brand new in the position, about 4 months. And we have talked about that. Some of these challenges of, busing alone, we've discovered is an interesting challenge having to do with the qualifications to drive a bus. And they're different between Vermont and New Hampshire, which means the Vermont kid is on a Vermont bus and that bus can't drive into New Hampshire because that driver isn't licensed in New Hampshire on a school bus. So their licenses are different. And so we talked about having to meet on the bridge over the river and the kids swap buses and go back in the other direction. And so there's things that with the class schedule is the other piece that the school days don't match. You'd think the school days in New Hampshire are a challenge. Now try going across state lines. So yes, Rep. Ladd, that's a conversation we're trying to figure out with our cross schools. And some of them are doing really good at it, but some are definitely struggling.
Can somebody respond to can a CTE student work? For example, can Val have a kid working in a work-based program till 6 o'clock? Can we extend this day?
I would, and I don't know for sure. I believe it would probably have to do with the student work permit based on the student's age. Correct, Val?
I don't know that I've had interns here who have worked till 6 o'clock at night as part of their internship, and just this fall, I worked out an arrangement with Conval so that the kid that's here for the internship is here only 1 day per week, but for 5 or 6 hours, so that there's some concentrated amount of time other than, the very, very short amounts that would normally be there. But then Conval decided that they weren't going to send kids out on internships anywhere other than their hometown to try to minimize the contact outside of the area. So the intern that I was going to have in the fall pushed off to the spring sometime. So
Yeah, we're hearing a lot of we don't want your COVID in our town problems.
Yep.
Yeah.
But it really sounds like this is a school to school issue.
Sounds like it.
We have our student interning in the evening. All of our students doing their LNAs, they're out until 9 o'clock at night. So not an issue here with that.
So Rip Ladd, if you send me an email about specifically where the challenge is, and I'll see if I can work with my counterpart in Vermont to tackle this specific issue, and then we'll go from there.
I've got the email right here. I'll forward it to you, Eric.
Perfect. Thank you.
The glories of local control. Huh?
Yeah. We had this with Vermont and New Hampshire over nursing and the hours and everything required. And so that's what started our relationship. So I'm happy to keep going with this.
Thank you.
So Al, if you could give us your highlights.
Yeah, I definitely echo the thoughts of other directors. Our teachers have really gone above and beyond to really reinvent how they teach and really trying to meet the needs of all students. And again, our sending schools, every sending school is on a different schedule. Our whole school, Littleton High School, is on a hybrid model. But fortunate enough to have, in most cases, 99% of our students are in our CTE classes 4 days a week.
That's great.
And that's very well received by our teachers. Much rather have them face-to-face than remote, but there are also students who are home from other schools and home for medical reasons. Maybe someone in the family they're concerned about. We're trying to reach them remotely as well, keep them engaged. Our numbers have been fairly consistent with other years, a little lower, but not much. Been able to work out some transportation issues we had to start with. The concern is really our faculty and support staff, and any little sniffle and they're sent home. So we've seen more teachers out. Friday, for example, within the high school, middle school, and CTE, we had 25% of our teachers out. And normally they would be in school with a minor sore throat or a sniffle. And now they're asked to stay home and receive a COVID test, and that takes a few days. So that's where I see the issues are right now. Now with the students, things are going really well. Interns, also I oversee that. We've had to make some changes to that, be really flexible. Some of the businesses have chosen not to have our students back. So we were able to still work with individuals at the businesses, but do things remotely. So we're trying to meet the needs of all students and trying to be flexible and creative. But overall, going very well. Very pleased.
Okay, well, thank you. So in our last couple minutes, I'd like to do some other positive announcements. I've got a couple quick ones, and then I'm gonna put Roxy on the spot as our newest member to share something really exciting with everybody else. So I had an initial conversation, and I've already looped Bruce into this one regarding heavy equipment. The national organization that accredits the heavy equipment program, so they accredit the White Mountain program for their heavy equipment and provides scholarship for high school students, has reached out. They were just given the green light by the federal government Department of Labor to be the oversight organization for apprenticeships for heavy equipment repair. And they are desperate to expand their programming. And so I did let them know that we have officially one heavy equipment program at the high school level, but a couple of high schools like Bruce that within their ag program deal with heavy equipment as well. So the members from this national organization would like to come to New Hampshire and take us around to where their dealers are that they work with for the heavy equipment dealers. And I did let them know, Pete, that the ADA is involved with that group as well. They were very happy to hear that. So when they come to, we will, they want to take a bus tour. They said, we'll go on the RV and we'll take the tour and go. So they'll introduce us to these heavy equipment companies where we could potentially set up some apprenticeships. And it could be a tie-in directly from our high school programs into an apprenticeship with the heavy equipment. And then Jeff had a timing perfect conversation with our school in Somersworth, who is talking with Southern Maine Community College, who has a certificate program in heavy machine operator, not to repair them, but as the operator. And they have the opportunity to receive as a donation a simulator at Somersworth. And so they're looking at developing a third year to their construction trade program, where after the student does 2 years in construction trade, they can do a third year with the simulator involved and potentially work towards a certificate in heavy machine operator through Southern Maine. So that was a bit of exciting for an industry that we know needs help. And then I got a call on Thursday from our contact at the FAA that the regional office, ours is in Burlington, Mass, every year provides an award in the community to a person or organization that helps elevate aviation or STEM education related through aviation. And they have been so floored by how quickly New Hampshire moved from a brief conversation about a drone to the launch of our aviation program in Conway less than a year, that we are the recipient this year of the Northeast Regional FAA Award for STEM. And so I and Virginia will be virtually receiving the award on the 28th. Virginia from Conway. I made sure she was involved because had it not been her push to move forward, we would still be in the development of the program. She has 2 full cohorts of students already involved in full-time aviation education up in Conway. So we were very excited about that. So that's, they said they've had other states that work towards this, but nobody has gone from 0 to fully operational in under a year. And so I'm going to continually give Virginia a lot of kudos. And the other 4 schools involved will be recognized as well in the award ceremony. So that's it for me. Roxy, if you're still on the line, we'd love to hear about what you have brought us into.
Sure, I am still on the line. Thank you and congratulations on that award. That's great news. I was made aware of a Department of Labor grant for rural health care. It's nationwide. It's giving out $40 million in the form of about $500,000 to $2.5 million. We have had a couple of meetings which Elisa Drisba, who is with the Department of Rural Health, helped me coordinate. We have approximately 40 people that are interested in working on this or finding out more. So big part was trying to find someone to be the lead, and Dartmouth Hitchcock has said they will be the lead. And there'll be a meeting on Thursday, October 15th, 1:30 to I think 2:30 to talk about how different organizations can help. So they're really getting started. The grant is due, I think, November 19th. So if anyone wants more information on that, please let me know. I think it's a great opportunity for healthcare to bring some money into the state. And the idea is to try to train healthcare workers in a variety of ways. It could be something like from LNA to RN. It could be, surgical techs. It could be a lot of different things. So, and then we'll be wanting to work with education as well as, maybe the technology sector too regarding this. So if anyone has interest, please reach out to me and I can forward you the documents. Initially, what Dartmouth is looking for, of any initial thoughts that, a particular organization would want to, think would be a good part of the grant, how they could work together. They do need employers to step up and say they'll hire so many of these people that are trained. But I think it's a really good opportunity for New Hampshire.
Thanks, Roxy. Yep. So I've been sitting in the meetings and I have included ourselves sort of representing the CTE centers as potential locations for education, because that's one of the pieces to this grant will be, where will you educate them? And I will, when I join into this meeting, one of the things that I will bring them is the discussion we have had of possibly doing another RV or two, but out them as mobile health center labs, where we could put in several of the beds with the mannequins. And because the idea for all this is to get the health education out to the rural areas. And if we don't have a CTE center or a community college there, how are we going to get the education out there? And doing it through a remote opportunity could be one option. So thank you, Roxy. I said she was on this board for one meeting, and 2 days later called me and said, "Hey, I found this grant. You want to help?" So thank you for that. Being everyone's time, does anybody have any other thing for the good of the cause before we adjourn for the day?
Eric, just let me mention, if you'd like a legislator has some contact with these folks for the heavy equipment tour, let me know. If I can make one of the stops or something.
Okay,
I'd be
perfect.
happy to do that.
Thank you. Okay.
Eric, ditto. I'd offer to the same.
Okay, thank you. I'm sure when they're coming down, I'll be sure to let everybody know, and we can all go for a ride in the bus. Okay, if that is it, if I could have a motion to adjourn, we will.
So moved.
I'll second.
Well, thank you. And so this will be the end of our October Advisory Committee meeting. Thank you all very much. And
You got to vote.
Yeah, just need to do the roll call. Sorry, Eric.
We have to do the roll call. I'm sorry. Vaso?
You can do it of the people that are here, though.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry about that. Vaso?
Aye.
Yeah, Rob?
Yes.
Beth?
Aye.
Oh, thank you. Rip Ladd?
Yes.
Senator Waters?
Yeah.
Pete?
Aye.
Al?
Aye.
Bruce?
Good to see you, folks. Thank you. Aye.
And Roxy?
Aye.
Thank you so much. It is unanimous. We have adjourned. Thank you all.
Aye.
Bye, everybody.
You eating a strawberry? Yeah.